And joining us now, the governor, the former governor of Arkansas, that is, the current Republican presidential candidate, Governor Mike Huckabee. Thanks very much for coming in.
My pleasure, Wolf.
Let's talk about this Wayne DuMond case, which all of a sudden has become an issue. People are making very serious accusations against you, including Lois Davidson, the mother of this young woman who was raped and killed after Wayne DuMond was released from prison. She's blaming you in part, and I want you to listen to what she said on the CBS Early Show earlier today.
I don't think Mr. Huckabee ought to be president. I don't think he should be running the country.
Because?
Because I don't think he did enough background research on Wayne DuMond's life, and if he didn't do that kind of research, I don't think he is going to be good for the country.
All right, well, that's a powerful statement from a woman. Our heart goes out to that woman, of course, but we need your response.
My heart goes out to the Shields family. There's no way to ever say anything that would bring some type of resolution to the understandable grief they have. And quite frankly, I don't blame people for being angry, whether they're angry at me or they want to be angry at the governor before me who actually commuted his sentence, which I didn't do, or angry at the parole board for paroling him. And if I'm the object of the anger, I understand that. I accept that.
Well, let me ask you this.
There's nothing right about this situation. It's a horrible thing.
Well, what responsibility do you have in this horrible tragedy that developed?
Wolf, my only official action in this was I denied his commutation. It was actually given by Jim Guy Tucker when Bill Clinton was governor back in 1992. It was on my desk. I did consider it. I even thought that he had met the criteria for parole and supported it. I wished I hadn't, but I didn't parole him, and governors don't parole people in Arkansas, nor can they stop a parole. And that's the tragedy, I think, that this went through several years and many different people, and all of us failed. That's the truth. All of us failed.
Because there's a letter that you apparently wrote that was published in the Arkansas Times to Wayne DuMond, in which you said to him, "My desire is that you be released from prison. I feel that parole is the best way for your reintroduction to society to take place." Did you write him such a letter?
I wrote it because that's when I denied him, and a parole meant that he had to have supervision. Had I granted his commutation, there would have been no supervision at all. I wasn't comfortable with that. He had an exemplary prison record. He had the recommendations. He had met all the criteria, and that's why I think all of us are very sad. But I did not commute his sentence, and his sentence was commuted several years before I became governor. That made him parole eligible. I not only denied his commutation once, actually 3 or 4 times when he presented it in the course of the time that I had the case during my tenure as governor.
There was an article written back in 2002 in the Arkansas Times that quoted 3 former parole members, basically as saying that you influenced them in a significant way to let this guy go. One, Charles Chastain, writing, "He made it obvious that he thought DuMond had gotten a raw deal and wanted us to take another look at it." Another, Irma Pondexter, "I signed the parole papers because the governor wanted DuMond paroled." And a third, Deborah Springer Sutler, "For Governor Huckabee to say that he had no influence with the board is something that he knows to be untrue. He came before the board and made his views known that DuMond should have been paroled." Are they telling the truth?
Wolf, they're not. The reality is that I was invited to the board by the chairman, Leroy Brownlee. He asked me to come as the new governor back in 1996. I talked to them. The discussion came up, but it wasn't about DuMond. The overall discussion was about my general policy toward clemency. Those are 3 people out of 7 that waited 6 years before they ever came forward and said there was pressure, and every one of them had been appointed by either Bill Clinton or Jim Guy Tucker before me. If as a brand new Republican governor I was able to go in and convince a board that every one of whom had been appointed by Democrat governors before me, I'm a pretty persuasive guy, and the other members of that board would give you a different story. And interestingly, these people who make these allegations not only did so 6 years later, but did so after I did not reappoint them to $75,000 a year jobs to which they had been appointed by a previous Democrat governor.
So the charge you're making is they were politicizing, they were blaming you out of political reasons. Is that what you're saying?
And Wolf, that's what's so heartbreaking about this. There are families who are truly understandably and reasonably grief-stricken. And for people to now politicize these deaths and to try to make a political case out of it, rather than to simply understand that a system failed and that we ought to extend our grief and heartfelt sorrow to these families, I just regret that politics is reduced to that.
Let me ask you, we're almost out of time, one final question on this national intelligence estimate that was just released on Iran 4 years ago, apparently stopping its work on a nuclear weapons program. The other night, last night, you were asked about it, and reporters there thought you seemed to be oblivious. You didn't know what was even in this NIE, even though it was been out for about 24 hours. Had you not been aware that this new national intelligence estimate had been released?
I had been up about 20 hours at that time, and had not even so much as had the opportunity to look at a newspaper. We were literally going from early in the morning to late that night and talking to guys like you. And so I had not had an opportunity to be briefed on it. And there are going to be times out there on the campaign trail, Wolf, you've been on the trail, you know, that candidates are literally driven from one event to the next. And it would have been nice had someone been able to first say, here's some things that are going on that are taking place. That didn't happen. It's going to happen again. That's what exactly it was about yesterday. We barely came up for air yesterday in Iowa when we were there campaigning.
Governor Huckabee, thanks very much for spending a few moments with us. Good luck.
Thank you very much, Wolf.